Family was never just a word to me. It was a responsibility, a promise, something you carried even when it got heavy. Growing up, my brother and I were close in that quiet, unspoken way. We didn't always say "I've got you," but it was understood. When he messed up, I covered. When things got hard, I adapted. I learned early how to be the dependable one, the sibling who didn't fall apart, who didn't ask for much, who made sure everyone else landed safely even if I didn't. I told myself that was love. As adults, nothing really changed. I paid my bills on time, built my credit slowly, skipped risks. He chased big ideas, big promises, and shortcuts. I admired his confidence even when it scared me. Part of me believed balance meant one of us had to be careful so the other could dream. That's probably why I didn't panic when he called me one evening and said, "I need to talk to you about something big." He showed up glowing, excitement pouring out of him before he even sat down. He talked fast, hands moving, words tumbling over each other like he was afraid I might interrupt. He'd found the truck. $1.55 00 Monster, brand new, lifted, spotless. He talked about how it wasn't just a truck, it was an investment. How it would open doors, how people would take him seriously, how this was finally his break. I listened. I nodded. I smiled when he smiled. Then he said it. "I just need you to co-sign." The air shifted instantly. That word co-sign hit heavier than the price tag. I felt it in my chest, that quiet alarm I'd learned not to ignore. I asked questions he didn't like, about interest rates, monthly payments, his income, his credit score. He waved them off with confidence that felt rehearsed. "It's fine. I've got it covered. The bank just needs someone with good credit. You won't even have to think about it." But I did think about it. I thought about how one late payment wouldn't just be his problem, how one missed month could follow me for years, how I'd worked too hard to build stability just to gamble it on someone else's optimism. When I hesitated, his tone changed. "Don't you trust me?" That hurt more than anything else, like my concern was betrayal, like love meant silence and signatures, not caution. I took a breath and told him the truth, calmly, carefully. I said I loved him, but I couldn't do it. I said the risk was too big. I said I wasn't willing to put my future on the line, even for family. He stared at me, stunned. Then his face hardened not with anger, but disappointment, the kind that makes you feel small. The kind that rewrites the story so you become the villain. "So that's it," he said. "You're really saying no." I nodded, my throat tight. He stood up without another word, no yelling, no argument, just silence heavy enough to crush the room. As he walked out, I didn't realize I was watching more than his back disappear. I was watching the beginning of an 8-month goodbye. I didn't expect the silence to start immediately. I thought he'd cool off, that a day or two would pass and things would return to normal. We'd argue, maybe. Laugh it off, family always bounced back, but the next morning, my phone was empty. No good morning text. No sarcastic meme, no follow-up message pretending nothing had happened. Just quiet. A thick, unsettling quiet that made me check my screen more times than I wanted to admit. Days turned into weeks. I sent a message first, nothing dramatic, just "Hey, hope you're good." It stayed unread. I called once and went straight to voicemail. I told myself he was busy. I told myself not to overthink it. But overthinking has a way of finding you anyway. Family gatherings became strange. His name hovered in conversations like something fragile no one wanted to touch. When he didn't show up to a birthday dinner, my aunt avoided my eyes. When holidays came, my phone stayed silent while group chats buzzed without me. I could feel the shift even when no one said it out loud. Somewhere in the quiet, the story had changed. I wasn't the careful one anymore. I was the selfish one, the sibling who could have helped but didn't, the one who chose money over blood. That version of me haunted my thoughts late at night. I replayed the conversation over and over, searching for a softer tone, a different phrasing, a way I could have said no without losing everything. Guilt is clever like that. It convinces you responsibility is the same as regret. 8 months is a long time to be erased. I missed things, inside jokes I didn't understand anymore. Stories I heard secondhand. I found out about milestones through social media instead of phone calls. Every update felt like a reminder that life went on perfectly fine without me, or at least that's how it looked. There were nights I stared at the ceiling, wondering if I'd made the wrong choice, if protecting myself was worth this kind of loneliness. Family had always been my anchor, and now it felt like I'd been cut loose. I almost called him more than once. I almost apologized for a decision I didn't regret just to make the ache stop, but something changed during those months. Slowly, quietly, without the constant pull to rescue someone else, I started paying attention to myself. My finances stabilized, my anxiety softened, I slept better, I stopped bracing for emergencies that weren't mine to solve. And that realization scared me, because it meant the peace I was feeling came at a price he wasn't willing to pay with me. The hardest part wasn't missing him. It was understanding that the love I thought we shared had conditions. That when I stopped being useful, I stopped being included. 8 months gave me clarity I never asked for. It showed me how quickly loyalty can turn into expectation, how boundaries can look like betrayal to people who benefit from you having none. By the time winter came, the silence didn't hurt the same way. It still stung, but it no longer controlled me. I'd stopped checking my phone as often, stopped waiting. I didn't know it yet, but those 8 months weren't punishment. They were preparation, because when the silence finally broke, I wouldn't be the same person who'd been left behind. The silence didn't break all at once. It cracked at first, it came in fragments, small comments slipped into conversations, awkward pauses when his name came up, looks that lingered a little too long. I noticed it at a family dinner when someone mentioned money and the table went quiet. I noticed it when my mother asked carefully if I'd heard from him lately. I hadn't, but something was changing. The version of my brother everyone had defended so fiercely started to unravel. The truck, the dream that had been worth cutting me off for, was no longer mentioned with pride. It became that thing spoken about in lowered voices. I learned, not directly but through the family grapevine, that payments were late, that overtime wasn't as steady as he'd promised. That confidence had turned into stress. The investment wasn't investing back. I didn't feel satisfied when I heard it. I felt tired, because part of me had seen this ending from the beginning, and knowing you were right doesn't always feel like winning. Sometimes it just confirms how avoidable the damage was. While his world tightened, mine quietly expanded. Without realizing it, I'd been building something solid. I paid off debt I'd been carrying for years. I started saving instead of scrambling. I said no more easily, not just to money, but to expectations that drained me. The absence that once felt like rejection began to feel like space. Then the tone around me shifted. Family members who had been distant grew warmer. Conversations changed. There were subtle acknowledgments, comments about how I'd always been responsible, how I'd done the smart thing. No one said you were right outright, but I heard it in what they didn't argue anymore. Still, there was no apology. 8 months of silence doesn't evaporate just because the truth gets uncomfortable. I wondered sometimes if he was embarrassed. If reaching out meant admitting he'd been wrong. Pride can be heavier than debt and just as hard to escape. Then one evening, my phone buzzed. His name on my screen felt unreal, like a ghost tapping on the glass. For a moment, I just stared at it. 8 months of rehearsed speeches vanished. All that was left was quiet curiosity. I answered. His voice sounded different, slower, less certain. The bravado was gone, replaced by exhaustion. He talked about work, about stress, about how things hadn't gone the way he'd planned. He didn't mention the truck at first. I listened. I didn't interrupt. I didn't rush to fix anything. That alone felt like growth. Eventually, he sighed and said, "I didn't think it would be this hard." There it was. Not an apology, not accountability, just reality finally catching up. He hinted at needing help. Nothing direct, but close enough to recognize. Old habits don't disappear overnight. And that's when I understood the truth of it all. The reason the silence hurt so much wasn't because I'd lost him. It was because I'd lost who I was around him. The fixer, the safety net, the person whose stability made his risks feel smaller. But I wasn't that person anymore. I told him I cared. I told him I hoped things improved. I didn't offer money. I didn't offer solutions. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty about it. When the call ended, I sat in the quiet, heart steady. The truth had finally come out, not just about the truck, but about us, and I was ready for whatever came next. When my brother called again a few weeks later, I wasn't surprised. I'd had time to think after our last conversation, time to recognize the pattern for what it was. The silence, the return, the careful way he circled his words. It all followed the same rhythm it always had. Distance when I wasn't useful, connection when he needed something. This time I answered without hesitation. We met in person, sitting across from each other at a small cafe that used to be our place. The familiarity felt strange, like wearing clothes that no longer fit. He looked older somehow, worn down by stress he'd once brushed off as temporary. He talked first. About pressure, about mistakes, about how everything had spiraled faster than he expected. He admitted the truck payments were crushing him, that he was behind, that the confidence he'd sold everyone, including himself, had cracked under reality. Then he finally looked at me and said, "I should have listened to you. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it landed. For 8 months, I'd imagined this moment 100 different ways. I'd pictured anger or tears, or the satisfaction of being proven right. But sitting there, all I felt was calm. I told him the truth. I told him how the silence hurt more than the refusal ever could. How being erased taught me that my value to him had been tied to what I could provide. How I'd spent years mistaking loyalty for obligation. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend himself. That alone was new. When he asked if I could help him now, really help him, my answer didn't come from resentment. It came from clarity. "I won't co-sign," I said gently. "I won't loan money, but I'll talk to you. I'll support you in ways that don't destroy me." He looked disappointed, but not angry. And that's when I realized this was the revenge he never saw coming. I hadn't ruined him. I hadn't abandoned him. I hadn't proven anything out of spite. I'd simply survived without him. And grown. The power shift was subtle, but undeniable. I wasn't begging for connection anymore. I wasn't negotiating my boundaries for approval. I was choosing peace. When we left the cafe, I felt lighter than I had in years. Some relationships don't end with explosions. They end with understanding that you can't go back to who you were without losing who you've become. Family doesn't mean self-sacrifice without limits. Love doesn't demand financial ruin as proof. And boundaries aren't punishments, they're protection. The sweetest revenge wasn't watching him struggle. It was knowing I no longer would. I kept my credit. I kept my stability. I kept my self-respect. And in doing so, I learned the hardest lesson of all. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do for family is say no, and mean it. That wasn't bitterness. That was freedom.